dust motes danced in the lone shaft of light piercing the gloom of the old attic, illuminating forgotten relics of a bygone era. A child's rocking horse, missing an eye, stood guard over stacks of mildewed books and yellowed lace. But it was the wooden chest in the far corner, bound with tarnished brass and emitting a faint, sweet scent of cedar and thyme, that held the true echoes of a story best left undisturbed. Inside, nestled amongst brittle silk and fading photographs, lay a small, leather-bound diary. Its pages, fragile as autumn leaves, whispered a tale of forbidden love, cruel injustice, and a legacy born from the deepest shadows of the Old South. This is the story of Isabella, a woman whose very existence was a testament to a daughter's curse, a curse woven into the fabric of a family's dark secrets and the unyielding grip of the past. The year was 1852. The air hung thick and humid over the sprawling cotton fields of Belle Reve, a plantation whose grandeur belied the simmering tensions beneath its manicured facade. Elias Thorne, the master of Belle Reve, was a man carved from the very stone of the antebellum aristocracy, proud, unyielding, and acutely aware of his place in a world he believed was divinely ordered. His wife, Eleanor, a woman of delicate beauty and even more delicate sensibilities, presided over the household with a quiet authority, her days filled with supervising servants, hosting elaborate dinners, and ensuring the smooth running of their opulent estate. They were to all outward appearances the epitome of Southern gentility, their lives a tapestry woven with privilege and expectation. Yet even in this seemingly idyllic existence, cracks began to show. Whispers followed Elias Thorne like shadows, faint at first, then growing bolder, carried on the breeze from the slave quarters to the main house. Whispers of a different kind of authority, a darker power he wielded over those deemed his property. Amongst the enslaved people of Belle Reve, one woman, a young house servant named Eliza, moved with a quiet dignity that set her apart. Her eyes, deep pools of liquid mahogany, held a wisdom that belied her youth, and her spirit, though constrained, burned with an unquenchable flame. It was this spirit, this quiet defiance, that inexplicably drew the attention of Elias Thorne. Their relationship, born in secrecy and shrouded in the pervasive power imbalance of the era, was a dangerous dance on the precipice of ruin. For Eliza, survival was paramount. For Elias, it was an exercise in absolute dominion, a forbidden indulgence hidden beneath layers of hypocrisy. The stolen moments, conducted under the cloak of night or in secluded corners of the vast plantation, were fraught with a silent terror for Eliza and a predatory thrill for Thorne. The weight of their clandestine encounters pressed down on Eliza, a heavy stone in her stomach, each passing day deepening the chasm of her despair. She knew the consequences should their secret be discovered, not just for herself, but for her community, for the fragile semblance of peace that existed, however uneasily, at Belle Reve. Eleanor Thorne, though seemingly oblivious in her world of social obligations and domestic management, was not entirely blind. A coldness had settled between her and Elias, a subtle shift in the dynamics of their shared life. She attributed it to the burdens of running a large estate, to the stresses of their social standing. But a deeper, unspoken fear gnawed at her, a suspicion she dared not voice, even to herself. Her days were spent overseeing the intricate details of Belle Reve, her nights often solitary, the grand four-poster bed feeling increasingly empty. The laughter of her white children, Samuel and Clara, echoed through the halls, a fragile shield against the encroaching silence that grew between husband and wife. The truth, however, could not be contained forever. A ripple spread through the slave quarters, a quiet understanding that passed between the women with knowing glances and hushed tones. Eliza's condition became undeniable. The rounded curve of her belly, the subtle changes in her gait, the morning sickness she bravely tried to conceal, all spoke a truth that was both terrifying and inevitable. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced Eliza's heart. She knew the societal condemnation, the cruel judgment that awaited her. But more than that, she feared for the child. A child born into a world that would deny its very humanity. a child whose existence would forever be a testament to a brutal reality. When the news finally reached Eleanor Thorne, it was not through direct confrontation, but through the insidious whispers of the other house servants, relayed with feigned innocence and veiled malice. The revelation struck her like a physical blow. The world she had so carefully constructed, the illusion of her perfect life, shattered around her. The betrayal was absolute, a searing wound to her pride and her heart. Her husband, the man she had married, had not only transgressed the boundaries of their marriage but had done so with a woman considered property, a woman beneath her in every conceivable social strata. The humiliation was unbearable, a poison seeping into every corner of her soul. Elias Thorne, confronted with the irrefutable evidence of his transgression, reacted with a chilling blend of anger and denial. He dismissed Eleanor's accusations with a brusque wave of his hand, attempting to reassert his authority, to belittle her suspicions. But even his formidable will could not erase the visible proof of his actions. The imminent birth of Eliza's child threatened to expose his deepest secrets, to shatter the carefully constructed facade of his public image. The shame for him was not in the act itself, but in the potential for public disgrace. He saw it not as a moral failing, but as a potential stain on the Thorne name, a challenge to his absolute control. The birth of Isabella, a girl with skin the color of rich earth and eyes that held a flicker of her father's stern gaze, sent a seismic shockwave through Belle Reve. Her arrival was not celebrated, but rather marked by a palpable tension, a hush that fell over the plantation. For Eleanor, Isabella was a living embodiment of Elias' betrayal, a constant, painful reminder of her husband's infidelity and the fragility of her own position. She looked at the child and saw not innocence, but a symbol of her humiliation, a dark mirror reflecting her deepest fears. The daughter's curse, as some of the enslaved people whispered, began to take root, a grim prophecy for the child born into such a tumultuous legacy. Isabella's early years were spent in the slave quarters, under the watchful, protective eye of Eliza. She grew up amidst the songs and stories of her mother's people, learning the rhythms of their lives, the quiet acts of resistance, the enduring strength of their spirit. Yet, even within this community, Isabella was an anomaly. Her lighter skin, a stark contrast to her mother's, marked her as different, a constant visual reminder of her complicated parentage. She was a child caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. Her father, Elias, acknowledged her only in the most indirect ways, a fleeting glance, a stern word, a distant, almost resentful presence in her life. He saw in her not a daughter, but a complication, a permanent scar on his otherwise unblemished reputation. Eliza, though heartbroken by her circumstances, poured all her love and fierce protection into Isabella. She taught her daughter to read and write in secret, scrawling letters in the dirt with sticks, whispering words of history and hope when no one was listening. She instilled in Isabella a sense of self-worth, a quiet resilience that would prove vital in the challenging years to come. Eliza knew that Isabella's mixed heritage, while a source of pain and societal condemnation, could also be a subtle weapon, a potential key to a different future. She held onto this fragile hope, nurturing it in the hidden corners of her heart, even as the shadow of Belle Reve's dark secrets stretched long and ominous around them. The stage was set for a life defined by this paradox, a girl born of a curse, yet destined to seek her own form of liberation. What if the very blood flowing through your veins was a constant reminder of both love and cruelty, of belonging and utter rejection? This was Isabella's reality. From the moment she drew her first breath on the sprawling, sun-baked fields of Belle Reve, her existence was a living paradox. Her light skin, a stark visual testament to her forbidden parentage, set her apart in the slave quarters, yet her status as enslaved irrevocably bound her to that world. She was the daughter of Elias Thorne, the powerful master, yet she was denied his name, his protection, and any semblance of legal recognition. She was a ghost in the grand house, a whisper of scandal, a constant, unsettling presence that both fascinated and repelled those around her. As Isabella grew from a wide-eyed child into a perceptive young woman, the unique burden of her heritage became increasingly apparent. She lived in the shadow of the main house, performing duties that often brought her into close proximity with her half-siblings, Samuel and Clara Thorne. Samuel, a few years her senior, possessed his father's imperious manner and a subtle, unsettling cruelty that he often directed towards the enslaved people. Clara, on the other hand, was a delicate blossom, raised in a gilded cage, shielded from the harsh realities of the plantation. Isabella observed them both with a quiet intensity, a mix of curiosity and a deep, unarticulated longing for a life that was tantalizingly close, yet impossibly out of reach. Eleanor Thorne's reaction to Isabella's presence was a complex tapestry of disdain, veiled animosity, and a profound, silent grief. She could not escape the sight of the girl whose face held unmistakable echoes of her husband. For Eleanor, Isabella was a living wound, a permanent stain on the sanctity of her marriage and the purity of her family line. She outwardly ignored Isabella, treating her with a chilling indifference that was arguably more cruel than overt malice. Yet beneath this glacial exterior, a flicker of something unreadable sometimes crossed her features when Isabella was near, perhaps a ghost of sorrow, or a deeper, more festering resentment. Elias Thorne, Isabella's biological father, maintained an almost complete emotional detachment. His interactions with her were purely transactional, issuing commands with the same clipped tone he used for any other enslaved person. He saw her as a problem, a consequence of his own indulgence, a constant threat to his carefully constructed public image. He deliberately kept her at a distance, ensuring she performed tasks that kept her out of sight, out of mind, particularly when guests were present. His denial was so absolute, so ingrained, that he seemed to genuinely forget at times the very blood that flowed in her veins. This willful blindness, however, only deepened Isabella's quiet understanding of his true character. Isabella's mother, Eliza, remained her steadfast anchor. Eliza had endured unspeakable pain, but her spirit, though scarred, was unbroken. She understood the intricacies of plantation life, the unspoken rules, the subtle ways to survive and even resist. She instilled in Isabella not just practical skills, but also a deep sense of self-worth and an unyielding belief in justice, even when it seemed an impossible dream. Eliza continued her secret lessons, teaching Isabella to read from smuggled scraps of newspaper, to write her name in the dust, to understand the world beyond the oppressive boundaries of Belle Reve. These clandestine lessons were a lifeline, a promise of intellectual freedom in a world that sought to deny her any freedom at all. One sweltering afternoon, a pivotal incident occurred that ripped through the fragile facade of Belle Reve. Elias Thorne, in a fit of rage over a perceived disobedience, brutally assaulted one of the elderly enslaved men. The violence was swift and horrifying, a stark reminder of the absolute power he wielded. Isabella, working nearby, witnessed the entire event. The sheer brutality, the casual disregard for human life, ignited a spark of profound anger within her. It was a visceral understanding of the systemic injustice that underpinned her world, a searing realization that her own father was capable of such monstrous acts. This moment solidified her resolve. She would not be like him, nor would she passively accept her fate. This incident, however, had another ripple effect. Clara Thorne, Elias' legitimate daughter, also witnessed a portion of the brutality. Shielded her entire life from such overt displays of cruelty, the sight unsettled her deeply. She retreated to her room, visibly shaken, and for days after her bright disposition was dimmed. While she could not fully comprehend the complexities of the enslaved people's lives, a seed of doubt was planted in her sheltered mind about the inherent goodness of her father and the moral fabric of their society. Her reaction, however fleeting, was a faint crack in the wall of their shared silence. The fear within the enslaved community intensified after this violent incident. They understood that the delicate balance of their existence was precarious, always at the mercy of the master's unpredictable temper. Eliza, seeing the fear in Isabella's eyes and knowing the volatile nature of Elia's thorn, began to plan in earnest. Her dreams of freedom for her daughter had always been a distant hope, but now they transformed into an urgent necessity. She started to gather what little resources she could, stashing away scraps of food, mending worn clothes, and cultivating a network of trust with others who harbored similar dangerous aspirations. Every conversation became coded, every glance held a hidden meaning. Isabella, now keenly aware of the escalating dangers, began to help her mother in small, clandestine ways. She listened intently to conversations in the main house, gleaning snippets of information about travel plans, visitors, and patrol routes. Her keen observation skills, honed by years of existing on the margins, became invaluable. She learned to read faces, to interpret silences, to understand the underlying currents of emotion and power that dictated life at Belle Reve. She was a silent observer, a shadow moving through the grand rooms, gathering intelligence with the quiet stealth of a seasoned spy. The whispers among the enslaved people grew louder, a low hum of discontent and desperation. The desire for freedom was a palpable force, a collective yearning that pulsed beneath the surface of their daily toil. Eliza, a quiet leader by nature, became a beacon of hope for many. Her resilience, her quiet determination, and her unwavering love for Isabella inspired others to consider the unimaginable: escape. The risks were immense, the consequences of failure brutal. But the alternative, a lifetime of servitude, of witnessing endless injustice, was becoming increasingly unbearable. One night, under the cover of a moonless sky, a desperate plan began to take shape. Eliza had heard of a network, an underground railroad that promised passage to the north, to freedom. The details were scarce, fraught with danger, and whispered in hushed tones around dying fires. But for Eliza, it was the only path, the only chance to break the daughter's curse that threatened to bind Isabella to a life of perpetual bondage. She knew the journey would be perilous, requiring immense courage, cunning, and an almost supernatural strength of will. But she also knew that the alternative was a slow, agonizing death of the spirit. The path to freedom, however distant and dangerous, was the only inheritance she truly desired for her daughter. Have you ever felt the relentless grip of desperation, the kind that sharpens your senses and makes every shadow a potential threat, every rustle of leaves a sign of discovery? For Eliza and Isabella, this was not a fleeting emotion, but the very air they breathed as the whispers of escape solidified into a terrifying plan. The decision had been made, forged in the crucible of Eliza's love and Isabella's growing understanding of her untenable existence. Belle Reve, despite its outward beauty, had become a prison, and freedom, a distant, shimmering mirage, was their only hope. The preparations were agonizingly slow and fraught with peril. Every stolen moment, every concealed item, every hushed conversation carried the weight of their lives. Eliza, with her quiet strength, meticulously gathered what little they would need: a small pouch of dried meat, a few hard biscuits, a carefully mended cloak for Isabella. She drew upon the hidden network within the enslaved community, securing a rudimentary map whispered from one trusted hand to another, a map whose lines were more hope than accurate geography. Her eyes, usually so calm, now held a constant flicker of fear, quickly masked whenever a white overseer or house servant was near. Isabella, now in her early teens, was no longer a passive recipient of her mother's protection. Her mixed heritage, while a source of pain, had also given her an unusual advantage. Her lighter skin sometimes allowed her to blend in, to move through certain areas of the plantation with less scrutiny than others. She used this to her benefit, observing patterns, identifying weaknesses in the patrols, and memorizing the lay of the land beyond the immediate slave quarters. Her keen intellect, nurtured by Eliza's secret lessons, proved invaluable. She absorbed every detail, every instruction, her young mind a sponge for the knowledge that could mean the difference between life and death. The night of their planned escape arrived draped in a thick, oppressive humidity. A crescent moon offered little light, swallowed by heavy clouds that promised a coming storm. This darkness, usually a source of unease, was now their greatest ally. Eliza and Isabella met at a prearranged spot on the edge of the Thorne property, their hearts hammering against their ribs like trapped birds. A few other enslaved individuals, driven by their own desperate yearning for freedom, had decided to join them. A young couple, Benjamin and Sarah, and an older man named Thomas, whose weathered face held the stories of countless injustices. Their initial steps were tentative, each crack of a twig underfoot sounding like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. They moved through dense thickets and shadowy forests, guided by the faint glow of distant stars and Eliza's unwavering sense of direction. The journey was immediately brutal. Thorns tore at their clothes and skin, mosquitoes swarmed, and the damp earth threatened to pull their feet into its muddy embrace. Fear was a constant companion, a cold knot in Isabella's stomach, but it was matched by a burgeoning sense of defiant exhilaration. With every step away from Belle Reve, a minuscule fragment of the daughter's curse seemed to lift. Days blurred into a grueling cycle of clandestine movement and terrified stillness. They traveled primarily at night, hiding in swamps and dense woods during the day, their bodies aching, their hunger gnawing. The fear of recapture was omnipresent. They knew the stories of those who failed, the brutal whippings, the cruel punishments, the chilling return to the very hell they sought to escape. Every distant dog bark, every rustle in the undergrowth, sent shivers of dread down their spines. Yet they pressed on, fueled by a collective dream of liberty. Their most harrowing encounter came on the third night. A small band of patrollers, alerted by a nearby plantation owner, stumbled upon their hiding spot near a shallow creek. The shouts, the barking dogs, and the terrifying glint of lanterns cutting through the darkness sent them scattering. Benjamin and Sarah, in a desperate attempt to create a diversion, drew the patrollers away, their cries fading into the night. Eliza and Isabella, along with Thomas, fled deeper into the swamp, the sounds of pursuit growing more distant but never truly vanishing. The loss of their companions, though not witnessed directly, hung heavy in the air, a grim reminder of the immense cost of their pursuit of freedom. The loss of Benjamin and Sarah, though devastating, galvanized Eliza and Isabella. Their resolve hardened. They knew they were now even more alone, relying solely on their wits and each other. Thomas, the older man, proved to be a quiet source of resilience, his knowledge of the wilderness invaluable. He knew which roots were safe to eat, how to find clean water, and how to move through the treacherous landscape with minimal disturbance. He spoke little, but his steady presence was a comfort, a reminder that they were not entirely isolated. As they pressed northward, the landscape slowly began to shift. The oppressive heat of the deep south gradually gave way to cooler air, the dense, humid forests thinning out into different kinds of woods. The change, though subtle, brought with it a flicker of renewed hope. They encountered hidden safe houses along the underground railroad, small, humble dwellings tended by abolitionists, both white and black, who risked everything to offer sanctuary. These brief respites were lifelines, providing food, rest, and much-needed guidance on the next leg of their perilous journey. At one such safe house, a Quaker woman with kind eyes and calloused hands offered Isabella a small, worn book of poetry. It was a simple gesture, yet profound. Isabella, whose only lessons had been clandestine, devoured the words, finding solace and strength in the verses. She realized that freedom was not just physical, but intellectual, the right to learn, to grow, to explore the vast landscapes of human thought. This encounter deepened her understanding of what she was truly fighting for, transforming her desperation into a powerful sense of purpose. Their journey continued, marked by close calls, narrow escapes, and an unwavering determination. They crossed rivers under the cover of darkness, walked hundreds of miles, their feet raw and bleeding, their bodies pushed to the brink of exhaustion. Eliza, though physically weary, never wavered. Her gaze remained fixed on Isabella, her love a protective shield against the harsh realities of their flight. She saw in Isabella not just her daughter, but the embodiment of a future she desperately hoped for, a future where the curse of their past could finally be broken. Finally, after weeks that felt like an eternity, they crossed into free territory. The air tasted different, lighter, imbued with a strange, exhilarating sense of possibility. The sounds were different too, the absence of the constant, underlying hum of oppression, replaced by the mundane noises of ordinary life. For the first time, Isabella could walk without the constant fear of being hunted, of being seen as property. The weight of the daughter's curse, though still a part of her history, felt a little lighter, a little more distant. They had escaped, but the journey to truly claim their freedom, to build a new life, had only just begun. The echoes of Belle Reve, however, would forever linger, a haunting melody in the backdrop of their new existence. Imagine waking up one day to a world where the very air felt different, lighter, cleaner, imbued with a strange, exhilarating sense of possibility. This was the profound, almost dizzying experience for Isabella and Eliza as they stepped onto free soil. The oppressive weight of Belle Reve, the constant fear of capture, the omnipresent shadow of Elia's thorn, had begun to recede, replaced by a cautious, yet undeniable hope. They had escaped the physical chains, but the psychological scars of their past, the lingering echoes of the daughter's curse, were deeply etched into their beings. Their initial arrival in the bustling northern city was overwhelming. The sheer volume of people, the unfamiliar architecture, the cacophony of new sounds. It was a stark contrast to the quiet, often terrifying isolation of the plantation. They found refuge in a vibrant, close-knit community of abolitionists and formerly enslaved people, a sanctuary where stories of escape were shared not with shame, but with pride and resilience. Here, Eliza and Isabella were welcomed, their courage celebrated, and their humanity affirmed in ways they had never known. Eliza, ever practical and resourceful, quickly found work as a laundress, her strong hands accustomed to hard labor. She toiled tirelessly, driven by her unwavering desire to provide a stable future for Isabella. Though freedom brought its own set of challenges, poverty, discrimination, and the constant threat of bounty hunters, Eliza faced them with a quiet determination that inspired all who knew her. She often spoke of their journey, not as a tragedy, but as a testament to their enduring spirit, a story she hoped Isabella would carry forward. Isabella, now with the freedom to learn openly, immersed herself in her studies with an insatiable hunger. The small book of poetry from the Quaker woman had opened a door, and now a whole library awaited her. She attended clandestine schools, devoured every book she could get her hands on, and engaged in fervent discussions with the community's intellectuals and activists. Her intellect, once suppressed, now blossomed. She quickly grasped complex concepts, her analytical mind dissecting history, philosophy, and the legal intricacies of the abolitionist movement. She recognized that true freedom wasn't just escaping bondage. It was about understanding the systems that perpetuated it and finding ways to dismantle them. It was during this time that Isabella's unique perspective began to take shape. She was a product of both worlds, the brutal reality of slavery and the enlightened ideals of freedom. She could see the nuances, the hypocrisy, the profound injustices that lay beneath the surface of American society. Her biracial heritage, once a source of pain and division, now became a powerful lens through which she viewed the world. She understood the complexities of race, power, and identity in a way few others could. This profound insight, coupled with her burgeoning eloquence, made her a compelling voice within the abolitionist circles. As Isabella matured into a young woman, her reputation as a formidable speaker began to spread. She spoke at small gatherings, then larger conventions, her voice clear and resonant, her words imbued with a powerful authenticity. She shared her personal story, not as a victim, but as a survivor, a witness to the horrors of slavery and a passionate advocate for justice. She captivated audiences with her vivid descriptions of Belle Reve, the chilling portrait of Elias Thorne, and the quiet dignity of her mother, Eliza. She spoke of the daughter's curse, not as a mystical hex, but as the societal burden placed upon those born into such a brutal legacy, and the imperative to break it. While Isabella found her voice in the abolitionist movement, the echoes of her past were never truly silent. The psychological scars remained. She sometimes found herself flinching at sudden loud noises, her heart racing at the sight of a man with a certain authoritative stride. The memories of Belle Reve, of the casual brutality, of her father's cold indifference, sometimes crept into her dreams, disturbing her peace. She realized that freedom was a continuous process, a journey not just of the body, but of the mind and spirit, to heal the wounds inflicted by a cruel past. Meanwhile, back at Belle Reve, the absence of Eliza and Isabella was noted, though discussed with hushed tones. Elias Thorne, enraged by their escape, launched a furious, yet ultimately fruitless, search. The idea that his property had simply vanished, that they had defied him, fueled his already considerable anger. Eleanor Thorne, while publicly maintaining her cold indifference, privately felt a complex mix of emotions. The living embodiment of her husband's betrayal was gone, yet the underlying shame and bitterness remained, festering within her. Her sons, Samuel and Clara, too, felt the ripple effects of the escape, their perspectives subtly altered by the unsettling event. Samuel Thorne, now a young man, was increasingly groomed to take over the plantation. He mimicked his father's harshness, but lacked Elia's underlying shrewdness. The escape of Eliza and Isabella, a symbol of defiance against his family's authority, inflamed his already volatile temper. He grew more rigid, more cruel, seeing any sign of dissent amongst the enslaved people as a direct challenge to his burgeoning power. He was a man steeped in the traditions of the Old South, blind to the changing tides that would soon engulf their way of life. Clara Thorne, however, continued to grapple with the lingering unease that had been planted by the earlier incident of violence. The disappearance of Eliza and Isabella, while not openly discussed in her presence, left an undeniable void. She sometimes found herself thinking of Isabella, the quiet, observant girl who moved like a shadow through their house. A seed of empathy, however small, had begun to sprout in her sheltered heart, prompting her to question the morality of their lavish lifestyle and the inherent injustice upon which it was built. She was a woman caught between the entrenched beliefs of her family and a nascent, unsettling awareness of a different truth. Isabella, miles away, continued to flourish. She understood that her story was not just her own, it was a testament to the resilience of countless others. She began to envision a future where not only were all people free from bondage, but where their stories were heard, documented, and remembered. She recognized the power of narrative, the importance of bearing witness. The daughter's curse transformed from a personal burden into a universal call for justice, a powerful narrative tool she wielded with growing mastery. She was not just escaping a past, she was actively shaping a new future, one word, one speech, one heartfelt plea at a time, her voice echoing the voices of those still silenced. Have you ever felt the powerful pull of a story, a narrative so compelling that it transcends time and demands to be told, to be heard, to be understood? For Isabella, her own life became that story, a profound testament to resilience and the enduring quest for justice. As she continued to speak on abolitionist platforms across the North, her voice resonated with an authenticity that was both captivating and deeply moving. She wasn't just recounting personal trauma. She was weaving a tapestry of shared human experience, exposing the brutal realities of slavery while championing the universal right to freedom. Isabella's eloquent speeches, rich with vivid detail and profound moral clarity, began to attract significant attention. She spoke of the quiet mornings at Belle Reve, the deceptively peaceful landscape, only to reveal the simmering cruelty beneath. She painted poignant portraits of her mother, Eliza, a woman of unyielding spirit and profound love, and of the casual brutality of Elias Thorne, her father, a man whose outward respectability masked a dark, tyrannical core. She articulated the insidious nature of the daughter's curse, how the very circumstances of one's birth could dictate a life of bondage, denial, and systemic injustice. Her impact was not limited to fervent abolitionist gatherings. Isabella's story, meticulously documented and powerfully delivered, found its way into newspapers and pamphlets, reaching a wider audience than she could address in person. Her narrative served as a potent counterargument to the pro-slavery rhetoric that sought to dehumanize enslaved people. She put a human face to the statistics, transforming abstract debates into urgent, personal pleas for liberation. Her unique perspective, as someone born of both worlds, allowed her to bridge divides, speaking to the consciences of those who had previously remained indifferent. While Isabella was building a new life and a powerful platform, the world she had left behind at Belle Reve was slowly crumbling. The Civil War erupted, tearing the nation apart and forever altering the landscape of the South. The grand illusions of the plantation aristocracy began to shatter under the weight of conflict and the inexorable march of history. For the Thorne family, the war brought immense hardship and profound change, forcing them to confront the very foundations of their existence. Elias Thorne, ever proud and unyielding, plunged into the Confederate cause with a fervor born of desperation. He saw the war as a defense of his way of life, his property, his absolute authority. But the war was a relentless devourer, consuming resources, men, and fortunes. Belle Reve, once a symbol of opulence, began to show the strains. The fields lay fallow, the workforce dwindled, and the grand house itself fell into disrepair, its former glory fading with each passing month of conflict. Elias, once so powerful, found himself increasingly powerless against the larger forces at play. Samuel Thorne, eager to prove himself worthy of his father's legacy, joined the Confederate Army. He fought with a reckless abandon, driven by a deep-seated anger and a belief in the inherent rightness of their cause. However, the brutality of war, the constant threat of death, and the gnawing hunger slowly eroded his youthful arrogance. He witnessed horrors that no amount of privilege could shield him from, and the rigid certainties of his upbringing began to fray at the edges. His letters home, initially filled with bravado, gradually revealed a man increasingly disillusioned and scarred. Clara Thorne, left to navigate the escalating chaos at Belle Reve with her ailing mother, Eleanor, found herself confronting the harsh realities of their world without the buffer of male protection. The enslaved people, emboldened by the prospect of freedom and the distraction of war, grew increasingly restive. Clara, forced to manage the failing estate, could no longer ignore the inherent injustices that had always underpinned their lives. The seeds of empathy that Isabella had inadvertently planted years ago now began to sprout, forcing Clara to reevaluate everything she had ever been taught about race, class, and morality. Eleanor Thorne, already a woman of fragile health and a broken spirit, succumbed to her long-held grief and resentment. The war, the decline of Belle Reve, and the growing sense of impending doom proved too much for her. She passed away quietly in her sleep, her final years marked by a profound melancholy. Her death, while sorrowful, also lifted a certain oppressive weight from the air of Belle Reve, a silent testament to the stifling atmosphere of unacknowledged pain and bitter secrets. Back in the North, Isabella continued her work, but with an intensified sense of urgency. The Emancipation Proclamation brought a wave of exultation, but she understood that legal freedom was only the first step. The true battle lay in securing civil rights, economic justice, and social equality for all formerly enslaved people. She dedicated herself to establishing schools, advocating for land reform, and ensuring that the promise of freedom was not an empty one. Her vision was not just for the abolition of slavery, but for the creation of a truly just and equitable society. During this period, Isabella also focused on healing the deep emotional wounds of her past. She worked with her mother, Eliza, to record their full story, recognizing its profound historical significance. They pored over Eliza's memories, filled in details, and crafted a narrative that served not just as a personal account, but as a powerful historical document. It was a painstaking, often painful process, but it was also deeply cathartic, allowing them to finally confront and process the trauma they had endured. This collaborative act of storytelling became a form of shared healing, a way to reclaim their narrative from the hands of their oppressors. The war finally ended, leaving the South in ruins and the nation forever changed. Belle Reve, like countless other plantations, was a shadow of its former self. Elias Thorne, his fortune gone, his vision of the old South shattered, was a broken man. Samuel returned from the war, scarred and disillusioned, facing a future that bore no resemblance to the one he had been groomed for. Clara, however, emerged from the ashes of their former life with a quiet strength and a burgeoning desire to understand the world anew. The daughter's curse had not just impacted Isabella, it had, in its own way, cursed the very foundations of the Thorne family, bringing them to a reckoning with their past. The stage was set for an unexpected convergence, a collision of past and present, freedom and consequence, as Isabella's journey began to circle back towards the very place she had desperately fled. Can a place ever truly shed its past, or do the echoes of its history forever haunt its grounds, whispering stories of triumph and sorrow, of cruelty and quiet resilience? For Isabella, Belle Reve was more than just a place. It was the crucible of her identity, the source of her pain, and the origin of her unwavering resolve. Decades after her desperate escape, with the nation grappling with the fragile promise of reconstruction, Isabella felt an undeniable pull back towards the very land that had once imprisoned her. This was not a return for vengeance, but a journey for closure, for understanding, and to confront the final, lingering shadows of the daughter's curse. The South Isabella returned to was a landscape irrevocably altered by war and emancipation. Belle Reve, once a symbol of opulence and brutal power, was now a decaying monument to a lost cause. The grand house stood dilapidated, its columns crumbling, its gardens overgrown. The cotton fields, once vibrant with slave labor, lay fallow or were tended by sharecroppers, a stark visual representation of a world turned upside down. The silence that hung over the estate was profound, broken only by the mournful creak of the wind through broken windows and the rustle of overgrown vegetation. Isabella arrived with her mother Eliza by her side. Eliza, though older and more frail, carried herself with an enduring dignity, her eyes still holding the wisdom of a lifetime of endurance. Their return was not without risk. The scars of war were fresh, and racial tensions ran high. But they were no longer fleeing. They returned as free women, Isabella a celebrated orator and activist, Eliza a testament to unbreakable spirit. Their presence was a powerful, silent declaration, a living challenge to the lingering prejudices of the old order. Their first encounter was with Clara Thorne. Clara, now a woman weathered by hardship and a quiet burden of guilt, recognized Isabella immediately. The years had etched lines of sorrow on Clara's face, but also a newfound humility. Their meeting was fraught with unspoken history, a delicate dance between two women whose lives had been irrevocably intertwined by the sins of a patriarch. Clara, shedding the vestiges of her privileged upbringing, expressed a profound, if belated, remorse for the injustices committed by her family. She confessed to her own complicity in silence, to her youthful blindness, and expressed a genuine desire for reconciliation. Isabella, ever the pragmatist, listened intently. She saw not just the daughter of her oppressor, but a woman grappling with the wreckage of her own past, a survivor in her own right. While she could not forget the pain, she recognized the possibility of shared humanity, of forging a new path forward. They spoke for hours, piecing together fragments of memory, sharing perspectives that had once been worlds apart. Clara revealed the tragic decline of Elias Thorne, a man utterly broken by the loss of his empire and his profound inability to adapt to a world without absolute power. He had died a bitter, solitary man, his final years consumed by resentment and regret. Samuel Thorne, too, was encountered. He was a shell of his former self, his swagger replaced by a profound weariness. The war had taken its toll, stripping away his arrogance and replacing it with a quiet despair. He recognized Isabella, but offered no apology, only a strained nod. He was a man trapped in the ghost of the Old South, unable to reconcile with a future he neither understood nor desired. Isabella observed him with a detached empathy, seeing not an enemy, but a man consumed by the very system he had fought to uphold. His existence served as a chilling reminder of the destructive power of unchecked privilege and inherited prejudice. The true purpose of Isabella's return, beyond reconciliation, was the establishment of a school for newly freed children on the very grounds of Belle Reve. With the help of Eliza and a few courageous local black leaders, and surprisingly, with Clara's quiet support, they repurposed a neglected outbuilding. Isabella believed that education was the ultimate weapon against the lingering effects of the daughter's curse, the key to true liberation and self-determination. She poured her heart and soul into teaching, instilling in her young students not just literacy, but a profound sense of their own worth, their history, and their limitless potential. Eliza, now a revered elder in the community, found a quiet peace in her final years. She watched Isabella teach, her eyes filled with pride, knowing that her daughter had not only broken the chains of bondage but had also forged a path for countless others. Eliza's life, though marked by immense suffering, ended with the profound satisfaction of witnessing the dawn of a new era, one her sacrifices had helped to bring about. Her legacy was not just survival, but the thriving spirit of her daughter and the children she inspired. Isabella's work at the school at Belle Reve became her life's defining mission. She taught not only academic subjects but also lessons in resilience, self-respect, and the enduring fight for justice. She shared her own story, including the truth of her parentage, not with bitterness, but as a testament to the power of overcoming adversity. She showed her students that their past, no matter how painful, did not define their future. The daughter's curse was not a sentence, but a challenge to be met, a narrative to be rewritten, a legacy to be transformed. The story of Isabella and Belle Reve became a powerful symbol. It was a testament to the fact that even from the deepest shadows of injustice, light could emerge. The plantation, once a site of oppression, slowly began its transformation into a beacon of hope and education. Isabella remained at Belle Reve, dedicating her life to nurturing future generations, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be forgotten, but learned from. Her journey, from an enslaved girl born of a forbidden union to a celebrated educator and activist, became a living testament to the enduring human spirit, a powerful narrative of justice, reconciliation, and the triumphant breaking of a generational curse. The echoes of the past remained, but now they harmonized with the hopeful songs of children learning, building a future born of hard-won freedom and an unshakable belief in equality.